Welcome to the channel tribe. In this session of Fireside Chat, we are having Rohan Bajaj discussing on shift left testing.
So welcome everyone to this Fireside Chat with Rohan Bajaj. I welcome you all to this event on behalf of the Test Tribe. I would like to give a huge shout out to our annual sponsors, Browser Stack, for sponsoring who are the exclusive sponsor to our community events and premier sponsor to our conferences. So thank you to Browser Stack and the team for the patronage. Now I'd like to welcome Rohan. So Rohan is a passionate engineering leader with about 10 plus years of experience in the e-commerce and cloud SaaS industry in Bangalore and Berlin. He enjoys doing a very interesting thing. He enjoys joining startups at an early stage and then help them grow and scale. He was a part of early team at Flipkart, which now all of us know in India and abroad, and saw its customers grow from few hundred to a few million users, to a lot of million users, right? So he's seen how scale happens at startups. He worked as a tech lead manager at Quikr, which is again a very popular platform in India, and managed the app engineering teams there. He also led and managed teams in US-based Enterprise SaaS firms like Nutanix and Clumio, and holds keen interest in FinTech space as well. One interesting part of Rohan's personality is that Rohan's profile is he's an active angel investor, which is very rare in the testing space. We don't find too many testers who are angel investors. And he invests in early stage startups. He has invested in about 20 plus startups already in US, India, and EMEA, with some of them already sitting at 30x valuation. So we will touch some base with Rohan about his angel investing philosophy, how we pick startups, how as normal task testers we can angel invest into startups, and how we can build our corpus there. So with that, I would like to welcome Rohan on stage. So please give him a round of applause, albeit virtually. So hi Rohan, you're on stage now.
Hey Ashutosh, hey everyone. Happy to be here. Thanks for the welcome. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you're audible, you're visible. The background looks lovely. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Sure.
So, Rohan,
So
how have you been? Did you wake up a little early for you for this meetup, or are you an early waker,
no,
early riser
I
as
am
well?
an early bird. I wake up around 7:30. Yeah, I'm up generally early. Timing is apt. I think for
Time
most
is
people, would at least people in India would have had their breakfast, and this will be their in between time before
yeah.
lunch, I guess. Or some people might be having a heavy brunch post this. Don't know. Whatever. This might be the different set of folks, I guess. At least in India, and then other geographies, obviously, it might be evening or afternoon.
Cool. So I'll typically walk through the format to everyone and to you also. So in Fireside Chat, we have some pre-collected questions which we'll ask Rohan. In the meantime, if you have any questions, you can put in the Q&A tab. If the question is related to something which we're already discussing, I'll take it in between. If it's something which is related to something else which we have not discussed till now, we will take it in the end, provided time permits. So and keep upvoting the questions. So the most popular questions we can get first, so that a lot of people get answered on their questions. Please feel free to use the Q&A tab, upvote the questions which you think should be answered first, and we will take in questions as and when possible. If it's related, we'll take in between. Otherwise, we'll take it in the end. So with that, Rohan, let's start. Are you ready?
Sure. Yes. Let's get
First,
started.
first and foremost, Rohan, fundamental question: how did you enter into testing? So a lot of us are like accidental testers, right? A lot of us, very few of us are planned testers. So how did you enter into testing?
So I can say I also entered it by chance because I during my campus placements I had got a opportunity for a software developer role at Samsung Noida, and I've been although I'm a Punjabi by origin, but I'm born and brought up in Bangalore, so I was looking to a good opportunity in Bangalore, and Samsung is a company, like, no offense, it's a great company, but it required you to do wear formals and stuff. So I had done all my formal shopping and was all set to go to join as a developer in Samsung Noida. But I think a couple of weeks before that, Flipkart's opportunity came knocking, and like that couple of things. It was in Bangalore, which is my preferred location. It was a growing startup at an early stage, which something I enjoy a lot, and also of course, an important factor. The compensation wise, it was much better. So yeah, I mean, it made a no brainer that I take up the opportunity, and the opportunity was for a automation test engineer role. So that's how I got started with Flipkart in 2012 in my career.
Great. So yeah, the Samsung Noida office, it runs decent memory in my head. It's near to where I'm sitting right now. It's like 5 minutes walk from here. So
Yeah,
yeah, and it's a good thing. So it's like you were at the right place at the right time, and you could enter into Flipkart and then the
correct.
software testing. And
Yeah.
how, and since you worked for 10 years, right? So before we enter into the theme of Flip testing, I want to delve into how was your perception about how testing has changed over the last decade or so while you are working it. How has it changed broadly in your head?
So yeah, great question, Ashutosh. So basically, testing when I had joined, like automation was not that popular. It was more of people were doing mix of manual and automated both. And then, me and some of my folks, at least in Flipkart, we brought about a change that we'll look to move towards at least 90 to 95% automation, and automate the regular, everyday repeated manual tests. And slowly, even the industry also started realizing and moving towards the automation strategy, which helps save on the overall timelines of the release, as well as skip on the repeated cycles of manual testing. So that way industry change came about, and I think that's how the SDET terminology was born: software development engineering test. And yeah, it's been a switch for the better, because yeah, like a lot of manual testers have also upskilled watching various
Yeah.
YouTube videos, and like maybe I'm sure a lot of your test tribe community events as well. So yeah, that's helped upskill a lot of folks, and that's how the industry is moving, and automation is replacing a lot of manual testing jobs, although few of them still exist. But yeah, for their resume in terms of profile and also in terms of better compensation, automation is the way forward, at least in testing space.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I agree with you on this, and I agree with you on this that at least in the resume space, automation has taken a lot more space as compared to the manual testing, and of
Traditional.
course in the normal testing parlance also and normal testing stuff also. Uh, it has taken a lot more space. So I think this is a question which has just come from Kunal, and which I think you should take right now because we're talking about startups, we're talking about testing and stuff like that. So it says startups are mostly development focused, and in the initial days, they don't care much about your overall quality. How do you establish that mindset shift within the team and the stakeholders? What do's and don'ts can you share? I think this is a great question because in general, people who enter into startups, testers who enter into startups, they face a lot of difficulty in communicating the value of testing to the stakeholders, to founders, to so how do we navigate through this?
Yeah, great question, Kunal. So, yeah, can we keep the question on the screen so that I can reflect on it side by side when, as a, yeah, thank you. So basically, like you said, that in initial days, startups don't focus much on the QA. So it's the responsibility of, say, the first QA engineer coming in, or maybe even when you're interviewing, to communicate to them that, a customer, when he comes onto your platform, be it a website or a mobile app, if the quality is not at a high bar, the customer might not even return to the platform. So that is
Yeah,
of paramount importance that it's at great quality, because yeah, I mean, if it's something the user does not like, they might not even come back ever, in spite of how much ever marketing you do. And like, if you are already at the organization, you can spend, say, first couple of days or few days to come up with a list of bugs. It might be manual testing to begin with, but come up with like, in order to automate better anyway, you need to understand the functionality, which will require some amount of exploratory testing. So you just navigate through the platform, come up with a bunch of issues already existing, and make them realize that, see boss, this is all the list of issues that are there on your platform. Do you want to like continue having these bugs, or do you want to bring in a process of quality where these are caught at a much early stage compared to the release? We catch these at the time when they are in development, and before shipping, these are all fixed and then shipped. So that is a kind of mindset shift we can bring about by proving them live examples, as well as telling them that, like, giving them live examples that this is a bug on the platform. I, as a customer, I come and use this, I see this, I'll not come to your platform again. So those are the kind of ways we can help them shift the mindset. And yeah, do's, in terms of do's and don'ts, I would say that be flexible, because in an early stage, like you have to wear multiple hats. It could be exploratory testing, it could be automated testing, it could even be commenting on the UX, UI UX. It could be helping with a better API design in terms of what you have seen earlier. Yeah, various different aspects is where you can contribute. Even in terms of product, help the product manager if you have experience in terms of suggesting what will be a better user experience in terms of creativity and things like that. So you'll have to wear multiple hats and like contribute in different aspects that will help have a bigger impact for the organization as well.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. I think I read somewhere or I heard from some founder that in today's competitive startup ecosystem, you don't own a user, you own a transaction. So you just so I might order from Swiggy if there is more discount or there's a better product one day, and I'm out order from Zomato tomorrow because there's a better product or
Correct.
a better discount. So I don't own a so nobody owns me right now. So
Correct. I
someone owns my
being When I was working at Flipkart, my couple of folks in my family were also working at Amazon, and it used to happen many times that I, being a Flipkart employee, was ordering from Amazon, and Amazon employees were ordering from Flipkart.
okay.
So in India, the price is the main thing. Like they are trying to offer multiple discounts to try and build in customer loyalty, but I don't think India is at that stage yet. India's audience is smart, and they always scout for the best offer. So that's what it is.
That's true. So let's enter into shift left now, which is our theme for today. Okay. So fundamental question now. What what are you actually shifting in shift left, let's say? So what is shift left in your understanding and what are you actually shifting there? And how is it different from traditional testing methods in your head?
So, interesting question. So, shift left is basically the movement in terms of pushing testing left towards the early stages of software development. So, we should not wait for testing efforts to start after the feature is ready and developed. Rather, we come up with a test plan with the list of test cases in order of priority right when the features, say, PRD or requirements document is created by the product manager, and say once we have the UX mocks on what is going to be developed. So in the shift left philosophy, when the developers are actually developing code in terms of backend and UI, the SDET or automation engineer is also at the same time developing a test plan, getting it reviewed, and then writing based on whatever UX widgets and API contract is shared, create page classes for the UI components and REST API wrappers for the APIs, so that when the build is available to test, it's just about adding validations and assertions in terms of validating the expected and actual behavior, and your automation is ready, say very fast, maybe within a week after dev complete. And we'll actually have even a pre-check-in test ready as soon as development is complete. So anytime a newer PR is going to be merged by the dev team, the pre-check-in should pass, only then it can be merged. So it gives an early indicator on the quality of the build. And something that are introducing regressions, they will not be allowed to be merged itself. So that is in a nutshell how shift left testing can help in terms of pushing left, not just the starting of testing, but also the overall release timeline
Preparation.
in terms of moving it left.
Moving. That makes sense. That's a fundamentally very valid point. That as testers, we sometimes we just put ourselves in silos. That okay, our job is to automate or let's say find bugs or to execute test cases, but we can contribute at different stages of product, like you mentioned, like right from when the UX mocks are up to an MVP is ready. That we can contribute from our own sense, from our own experience. That okay, this UX mockup can change like this, and this is how we can actually change at an early stage itself. This makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, from a value perspective, uh, what value, what value addition, or what benefits do you see after adoption of a mechanism like shift left testing?
Okay, another interesting question. So basically, the value we'll see is that we are not having all the bugs reported in the couple of days before the release, where typically testing will start after development is done, and then everyone is on it and finding bugs, and then there is panic created in terms of meeting the timeline. So all that panic situation will be shifted left. That even as soon as the development is happening, we are reporting bugs immediately after dev complete, and it helps filter out bugs at each stage of the cycle rather than all at the end. And that way it benefits, basically the bugs are scattered, developers, product and testing team all are at more peace. like they don't have to spend 20 hours in office couple of days prior to the release. They can work their usual hours. And of course the main benefit is the release will go on time, because like we have been catching bugs
Yeah,
throughout the
definitely. Definitely.
process. So yeah.
Got it. This is an interesting question again from Kunal. I think we should take it at this stage. So Kunal is asking, is shift left more about tester drafting test plans in early stages by themselves, or it's more about verification and coordination with other stakeholders? So that's his
So
question.
it's, yeah, interesting question again, Kunal. I think it's a mix of both, not just, so what we are talking in terms of shift left testing, that we draft test plans and come up with page class libraries for UI and API, and get the test plan reviewed, etc. That is one thing. But in terms of developer mindset, also, like they need to, okay, UX mocks of course will be created, but then API contract is sometimes a thing which is tend to be ignored. Like they directly start working on the API and just give the endpoint details. So a mock API contract should be shared with the testing team as part of the shift left, because they will consider that as a source of truth and write our automation accordingly. And of course, if there are changes in contract later, once the developer is changing, the testing team can also change their contract. But then, yeah, I mean, shift left is also about whoever is done with their task early helps the other side out. Like say, backend development is ready, and like all its development resources are free. Now they can maybe assist in terms of writing say a couple of automation scenarios or testing out certain things manually. So that way, they help out each other. And likewise, if our automation is kind of, it happens that sometimes in my projects my automation is complete even before the development is complete. So I have my stubs and everything in place, so we help out by doing say some smaller bug fixes or things like that, what we can help. So shift left is as a team, everyone shifting left and also contributing to each other's areas and enhancing your own skill set at the same time.
Interesting. Interesting answer. So before I take the next audience question, which I'll take after this one, which is in my list, how is in your understanding and your experience, and you're talking to a lot of testers and other stakeholders across the industry, how has been the adoption of shift left till now? Where does this suit? Where does this suit extremely well, and where does this suit does not suit at all? So there might be cases, right, where shift left is like, oh, okay, ये तो करना ही है. This is what we should actually do it. And there must be cases where it doesn't work as expected. So how has been the adoption, and where does it work well, and where does it not work well?
So, I mean, in a very early stage when the requirements are not clear, and like it's highly dynamic, is maybe an example of things where it might not work well. But it's only like 5% of the scenarios, I would say. 95% scenarios in a regular release, which follows a cadence, say once a week, once in 2 weeks, or things like that, whatever. In those cases, majority of the scenarios, it will work really well, because rather than having all the bugs crowded towards a couple of days prior to release, we will be having them streamlined over time, as and when the development features are ready. Immediately we also help catch bugs via, because automation is also in place and just a few things need to be added in terms of validation. So we keep catching bugs throughout the cycle rather than crowding it towards the end of the cycle. So I would say 95% of the scenarios it would help adopt the shift left approach.
Okay. And how has been the adoption in general? So how do you see companies adopting it? So are there too many companies adopting it? People are still learning and still trying to figure out the value of auto shift left and to get that mindset change.
Yeah, it's slowly getting adopted. Like at least last couple of organizations when I joined is when I introduced this in my organization. So I mean, people, you need to make people realize the value addition, like Kunal's question, that how do you convince people. So you need to show the value that it will add. Only then will people be willing to adopt it. You might see some initial resistance in terms of adoption, because it is taking developers out of their comfort zone, that uh, as soon as the development is in progress, you will not be allowed to merge your PR until say a pre-check-in test passes. So they are not used
Right.
to that in most cases. So
Yeah.
there might be some sonar checks like say lint errors or certain things that they are used to, but running an automation case even when the feature is in development is something which is rare. So yeah, it's slowly about realizing, making them realize that it's for their own benefit as well, that things are immediately caught rather than at a later stage where release timeline is on the line. So yeah, I mean, slowly it's about convincing people. And
Connection.
I think maybe 20-25% of the organizations have kind of realized the importance and moved towards this. But
Yeah.
slowly I see this increasing, and maybe it should increase in the next couple of years to
Mm.
upwards of 75-80%.
Yeah, it will make a lot of sense because because as product managers or as founders or as business owners, people are chasing lower time to markets and they want to integrate the departments as quickly as possible so that they can achieve the lower time to market targets and beat competition here and there. I think for that it's going to be a mandatory requirement in the future. Makes sense. Uh, there's a question from Dinesh, who is a software engineer at Nielsen, okay, from Chennai, uh, which I think we should take right now. Currently, in sprint automation is the main challenge for automation testers, and which you might also be facing and which might have also faced. What are your thoughts on this? How do we overcome this? And in your head, will shift left approach solve this?
So is the first line a question or a statement? Because the rest of the questions are based on the first
No,
line.
I think the
So
first, if I'm getting it right, the first line is a statement.
yeah,
What's your thought
even I
on
think so.
how it starts here?
Yeah, so I think it's a challenge for sure, Dinesh, but it's one of the very interesting things to work on because it will help at the end of the day simplify your life. You will not have to spend night outs or office or virtually working if it's remote that prior to release, because it will help ease up your whole process. And how can, I mean, we overcome this is basically it's, we don't need to overcome in sprint automation, we need to face the challenge and like work on making sure that we have what we need to enable it. So basically, if you want to come up with a good test plan, if it's a big feature, you should request for a PRD, which is a project requirement description from the product manager, so that you can work on a good test plan covering all the requirements. Then at the same time, from the UX, you should request a mock UI mocks of the feature, UX mocks. And from the backend, you should request a API contract of all the APIs backend functionality being added. So these are what you need to contribute effectively. So these are things you will have to request and maybe demand for if the request is not easily accepted. And shift left, of course, will solve all of this because yeah, I mean, you're actually shifting the entire release process left, not just testing but also backend, UI, everything is shifting left. And at the end, you are just enabling the organization to meet the release timeline. So that is something the product managers will be very happy about. They always crave for meeting the release timelines. So once these happen, I think they'll be the first ones to support you in terms of whatever you need so that the release happens on time.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. But I think this is a good question because instant automation is a challenge for a lot of people, as much
Right.
as it's need of the hour, but challenging, but implementing it in the real projects is tricky at times.
Sure.
Okay, from automation is one type of testing which we can surely do. Let's say if we get the right documentation at times, right? From an exploratory testing standpoint, not from an automation standpoint, but from an exploratory standpoint, how does shift left work? Does it only apply to automation shift left, or is it applies to exploratory testing also, the shift left testing approach?
It should apply obviously to exploratory testing also, because like we mentioned that, say, test plan is something all testers, even exploratory testers, work on
Yeah.
coming up with. So yeah, once you start this process early, as soon as you have the project requirement, like product requirements description, so yeah, basically the requirement specification, you come up with a good test plan, get it reviewed by the team even when the development is still in process. And yeah, I mean, you make your priority of test cases clear in terms of, as soon as any functionality is available, what are the areas you will focus on. Even in terms of pre-check-in, if it's not automated, at least manually have in your I mean, as part of the test plan, have it in your plan which are going to be the highest, like pre-check-in or P0 level test cases, which have to be executed as soon as the build arrives. So yeah, I mean, that's how the manual side of shift left would look like.
Yeah, got it. Got it. Makes sense. This is an interesting question, which I think we should take right now, which is from Dhananjay Desukar. He says, "How do you measure ROI in shift lifting approach, and how much cost, if you from your understanding, and if you can dwell around the details, or if you can just give us a vague idea about that? Did you save up by using this approach?"
Sure. So how you measure ROI? Basically, you have a regular project of yours. Like, take the example of number of days you took to test out the entire product, and also in terms of the release timelines, whether it happened smoothly on the time, or there were some delays, or was there some panic at the last minute. and compare that with another similar scale project where shift left was implemented, and check the number of days spent in the cycle on the testing out, and then also the same in terms of adherence to the release timelines. And another important factor could be the number of bugs caught along the way. How many were caught during the first like regular project testing, and how many were caught when you had actually implemented the shift left. That will help identify like different kinds of in terms of the number of hours or days saved in terms of automation efforts, adherence to the release timelines, and number of bugs caught early in the cycle. All those will help you measure the ROI in the shift left testing, and how much cost it's associated with the same thing. That if the release is delayed by a few days or a few hours, that is a cost, right? At the end, you are shipping products for the customer, and those are being delayed or being shipped with poorer quality. So at the end, each of those is a cost. And even the number of extra hours being spent by each resource for testing it out, that is at the end, again, every resource is being paid a salary. So the number of hours being spent extra per resource is also a cost. So all of these are going to be saved by the shift left approach.
Got it. I think this could be measured in the sense, like you mentioned, that if you can have comparative projects and where we see where did we land in the first project without shift left, where we landed with
Second,
shift left, and
correct.
how much bug did we find early, and how much manpower did we save, and actually how much how early did we deliver in a shift left testing approach. That could also be a business impact towards doing it. Right? Makes sense.
Definitely.
I have two counter questions now towards shift left. First is in my list, and then is in the audience list. So first, I'll ask what's in my list. As testers, should we ask leadership to give us enough time to testing, then in a matter to suppress testing by shift left? What are your thoughts on this? Say? Because as testers, we want to have time to, let's say, to give our craft glory and to have the crafty approach towards testing. Should we ask that time, or in the matters towards suppressing this testing time?
So I would say whenever a newer project development starts, it often happens that QA automation engineers or SDETs are working on the backlog of the previous sprint automation. So
Correct.
what we need to do is request for a parking window for one project of backlog, and say that we will pick it up at a slightly later stage, and let's start a project where development and automation activities are happening in parallel, so that as soon as development starts, the testing in terms of test planning, and then post the test plan writing of the page classes and test stubs basically starts in parallel. And once a project is delivered, if the company sees value in it, and if you are able to convince them in terms of having a much smoother release than usual with bugs caught early, company will definitely assist you in terms of implementing that approach in all projects going forward as well, especially the product team, because they are the ones who are after the timelines.
Correct. Makes sense. Makes sense. Now, this is a question from Kunal again, and I think a great question. Oh, no, not this one. Just wait. There was another question. Okay, yeah, this one. With shifting left, Kunal, question again. With shifting left and covering more grounds, how do we make sure that we don't lose focus on of the right things like end-to-end testing, UAT, production check, etc.?
So, Kunal, these are independent areas. These are not interconnected. So, shift left is basically starting the testing process early. And these things, E2E, UAT, production check, will anyway happen because these happen at slightly later stages once the product is available to test. Shift left is more about starting testing and test planning in parallel with the development starting. And of course, since you have caught most of the bugs early in the process, you will have a lot more time towards the end to focus on all of the E2E, UAT, production check typically happens after a release. UAT and E2E, you will have sufficient time in the second half of the sprint to completely focus on that, because you have actually tested out the functionality already.
Got it. Got it. This is again a question in my list which says, so like you're seeing, and like in general you would have also seen, there's a lot of apprehension in teams about shifting of testing approach. Why should we test early? What's the benefit? We already have a backlog. We're already slogging a lot and stuff like that. So there is an apprehension from the testing teams also in general. As much as there are from other stakeholders, but there is apprehension from testing teams. So how do we convince our team members towards adoption of a shift left strategy? What is in for the testing team members in general? What do they get from our shift left testing approach?
So this you're talking in terms of automation, right, or in general automation and
In
manual?
general, shift left testing approach.
So yeah, likewise for both manual and automation, like like you don't want to be in a state where QA team is being blamed for a late release, whereas it is actually because we are starting testing late. So be in a better space, start testing early, demand for starting testing early, and uh, that way you will convince the stakeholders that you will be able to add value in terms of starting testing early. You will catch bugs along the way and make sure that a better product quality is shipped. And also there's avoiding last minute hassles in terms of lot of bugs, unknown bugs coming up at the last moment which might delay the release. All of these are great benefits which will help both manual and automation testers and the organization in general.
Uh, uh, Interesting. So there's one question. In sprint is this has happened. Okay. Now, if you were to talk, this is a question from Srini, who's a lead software at. I mentioned the org. What in your head could be the drawbacks or challenges of shift left testing approach?
Okay, so there are very few to be frank, but then, like we mentioned earlier, that if there is something project which is not requirements are not finalized, it are being finalized along the way, and it's a very dynamic project. That could be one scenario where like starting testing early might not help if the requirements itself are not finalized. But in most cases these days it is finalized. It's not gone are the days where product managers themselves don't know their job in terms of finalizing on the requirements. We have good PMs coming out of top premier institutes, and this is a rarely seen scenario. But apart from that also, like other disadvantage, I mean, it's not a disadvantage, like getting a buy-in from the dev team can be slightly tricky at first, because like they have to change their way of working in terms of they are relaxed during the development cycle, that okay, we are working, we have enough time till cutoff, we'll work. But when you come shift left and like start catching bugs when they are writing code, the initial resistance obviously will be there, because you are questioning their quality of work. But then at the end of the day they will also be blamed alongside QA, that if the release is going late because of more bugs, it is because partially that their code had a lot of bugs. So that way, like maybe a project is the time they'll take to adjust, but once they also realize the value addition, they will also start more accepting and like recommending that approach. So even in my organization, current organization, I initially saw a lot of resistance from the dev team. They were like, no, things are working fine the way they are, why do we want to change it and all. But after a couple of projects, now development team, any new developer who joins in the dev team give a onboarding in terms of how to work with the shift left approach. So that is part of the company culture right now.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. There are two questions which I'm merging right now. So one is how to apply shift left testing in mobile application automation testing, which I think are broadly have answered. And another is about how do we do shift left testing approach in a performance testing paradigm, from a performance testing point of view, because from a performance testing point of view, the servers are not ready, things are scaling up and stuff like that. So from these two perspectives, how does shift left testing approach works?
Sure. So mobile app will be pretty similar to web
Yep.
application, that you will start writing your test plan and also test stubs and page classes of the mobile application in parallel with the dev, and raise bugs as soon as the dev any feature is being completed rather than at a later stage. So it's pretty similar in that aspect. I have myself worked on that in Flipkart and Quikr while testing the mobile apps. And coming to the second question, which is on performance, so yeah, that is slightly more tricky, that you can only come up with requirements, but until the system is ready you cannot really simulate placing load on a server. So you have your at least test scenarios for performance, like whatever load you intend to different loads you intend to load the system with ready. And like if you have to write certain scripts, keep them ready in terms of sometimes you need to write scripts in terms of automation code as well, like in terms of JMeter, certain small scripts or there are other tools like locust and load runner. So depending on the tool you are using, if you need to write certain scripts, have them ready, have your test plans ready, and when the server is available to load, you can like, rather than when it's completely ready, maybe run a couple of scenarios once it is the server itself is under development, so that as and when the improvements are being done, you can quantify that from a testing load testing perspective as well, that with this improvement optimization, it helped increase the capacity of the system from x to y, so, or x to x by whatever lower multiple. So that way, like, you can help classify the quality of improvements being done in the performance load handling by your shift left in performance testing.
Got it. Makes sense. There's one follow-up question from Kunal before I move to the other part of this discussion. So this, I think, this is the follow-up of we were discussing end-to-end UAT and other types. So we get limited time in each sprint. If we are involved from early stage, then how do we make sure we are allocating enough time to all the activities automation? This can impact our project timelines, right? That's his question.
Yes, interesting question again, Kunal. Lot of interesting questions. So basically, like I was saying, that we should request that as soon as the development of a feature is starting, the automation or testing team will start working on it at the same time, rather than focusing on, say, backlog of a previous project, or completing up any pending automation. We will start in parallel, so that we have as much time as the development team has, and of course, like, organizations give a week or two extra to the testing team to test it out effectively. So effectively, you will have more time than in a usual project. When you start testing late, you're starting testing early, and you have the additional buffer time, so you will have actually more time. And I'm sure, like, once you work on it, you might have some extra bandwidth available during the sprint to also do something else, because you have completed all your automation and testing pretty early, and also caught a lot of bugs. So at a later stage, when things are relatively stable, you'll have a lot more time to focus on different types of testing or any other aspects that you want to focus on.
Makes sense. Certainly makes sense. One question in my list is: do you think is shift left more of a mindset or cultural change, or is it something else which we are not able to perceive as of now?
So shift left testing is basically an approach to software testing, which is performed earlier in the life cycle. So it started, I think, way back in 2001. Larry Smith was the one who proposed that. So I can also quickly share the Wikipedia link for the same in the chat, so that people are aware. It's like, I think there was one question in the chat as well, where someone was asking, uh, Gautami was asking if it's a methodology or type of testing. So it's kind of a approach, or methodology. And I've shared the link of Wikipedia one in the chat, where it's a basically type of testing where like, all lot of questions people asked are also going to be answered here. What is the harm due to late testing? What are the different types of shift left testing? With illustrations and all are all part of it. So do read through that. It's a very interesting approach to testing.
Got it. Okay, so this is an interesting question from Renuka, and I'll put this on the page. Okay, so do you think shift left is contributing to a negative ROI in automation? And I asked her certain more details. So she said, like, build is not stable, so there'll be more failed percentage, and you might see more false positive. And script changes multiple times as feature is not ready, and based on dev changes, it could result in negative ROIs. That's what is her thought. And what are your thoughts on this?
So Renuka partially right, but then ROI is typically taken into consideration once a project is being shipped, not during the cycle. So no one will calculate the ROI during the middle of the project. It's typically done at the end of the project, and by then, like, things are much stable, rather than focusing on automation after the feature is completely ready. You have 70-80% of it ready when it's in progress itself, development is in progress, and the remaining 15-20% you do it once it's completely stable. And like, it will help get you a faster all green, and also catch bugs early, and ultimately it will lead to a much better ROI than the regular approach. So don't calculate ROI during the process, because no one is going to track automation success rate once the development is still in process. Only once the development is done is when they will track. So I mean, any previous project, all the regression will be ready, and the current feature. Once the project is maybe towards the release, the last week, that is when the links for the automation for the current project will actually be considered.
God, makes sense. I think now we can move this discussion to the other part. I'll just quickly check. I think Dinesh's question was just answered in the
Yeah.
form of Rimka's question. So this is also done. So I'll now we'll quickly move towards the next part of this discussion about which is about how Rohan has been angel investing as a tester and how other testers can also, and breaking some myths about angel investing from a normal middle class slash testing tester's point of view. So Rohan, how did you started angel investing and how can normal testers like us, or if you can first explain what angel investing is about, and then how did you start it doing it, and how can we as normal testers keep doing angel investing and not just limit ourselves to investing investment mechanisms like let's say stocks or let's say fixed deposits.
Right. So yeah, talk about the first part. What is angel investing? So guys, angel investing is nothing but a fancy term for early stage startup investing. So it got slightly more popular. Like, it's a very niche form of investing, which only 0.01% of the country's population is aware of, and maybe it slightly got highlighted during the towards the end of the last year when first season of Shark Tank India premiered, and people kind of discovered, like
Yeah,
how people can invest in unlisted startups. So I myself got to know about it during early days of Flipkart when I as an employee I had got ESOPs, and I saw the kind of returns, the ESOPs in unlisted ESOPs or even any kind of shares in unlisted companies see. So if a company does well, basically when a share is listed, right, when a company is public, you either bid for it, say via Demat account or Zerodha, whatever, or once it's public, it's available on the NSE, BSE, etc. So there, you need to really time your entry and exit well to maybe see, say, 30, 40, or 50, 60%. Because of COVID, it's even going upwards to 100% returns if you time your entry and exit well. But in angel investing or startup early stage startup investing, we don't talk about returns in terms of percentage. We talk it up in terms of number of multiple times your wealth has grown. So 100%, for example, is like 2x or whatever. But like we have seen, like, at least in my portfolio, one of the Singapore based fintech companies, some of you are from Singapore, so I don't know if you'll be aware, there's a fintech company called Spenmo. So I invested about 1 lakh in them 1.5 years back, and that has grown 35x in 1.5 years and is currently at 35 lakhs. So it's at 35x. So we don't talk returns in terms of percentage. We talk about returns in terms of multiple x. How many times has your wealth grown? And it's a very interesting form of investing. Like, like uh, some of the companies that go on Shark Tank, basically there's a syndicate. There's a concept of a syndicate, which is a group of investors, and I run my own syndicate on multiple platforms like AngelList, Let's Venture, and multiple other forums. So there are a lot of interesting people in my syndicate. For example, MD of Volvo India, uh, the founders of Nutanix, Dheeraj Pandey, founder of DevRev, which is Manoj and Dheeraj, and folks from Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Amazon, both US and India. And I was in Europe for a while, so the head of Trivago Europe, which is like a maybe make my trip equivalent of Europe. And then there's Delivery Hero, Zalando, which are some more portals from Europe. And then Indian startups, of course, like Flipkart, Ola, Paytm, Zomato. Those are all, like a lot of engineers, marketing, sales folks from these are part of my syndicate. And how we add value is that, like, people can, become, say, mini sharks, where you can invest in companies from amounts starting as low as 10 to 15,000 rupees. So a couple of weeks back, we invested in SpaceX, which is Elon Musk's second big company after Tesla, and we all know the kind of meteoric rise of stock that Tesla saw. So SpaceX is another one which we are expecting similar returns. And then other premier companies that we have done are Razorpay, Rupify, which is another fintech out of India. So in general, they say in the angel investing world that, like, startup investing is of course risky, but how we look to minimize the risk is in terms of diversifying and investing smaller amounts in multiple companies. So for example, if you have a budget of, so in angel investing world, they typically say one out of 30 investments that you do, even if one startup out of 30 clicks, that
yeah,
offsets even if the other 29 becomes zero. For example, say, just to give an example, if I invested 1 lakh each in 30 companies. Overall, my investment is 30 lakhs. But the one company that I'm talking about, one company's 1 lakh is already at 35 lakhs. So that is already offset my other 30 investments as well. But I showed like my success ratio is better. Like at least 80 to 85% of my startups are at least at 2x or more. So that way I carefully analyze startups and then share those only in which I'm personally investing in with my syndicate. So that is another thing I do actively apart from my software role. And yeah, I mean, what we suggest to our syndicate is basically if you have say a budget of 3 lakhs a year, rather than putting all 3 lakhs in one startup, you put say 25,000 each in 12 different startups, or 20,000 each in 15 different startups. That way you are diversifying and reducing the risk to a bare minimum, because one out of those does well, you actually see profits which will supersede your overall investment as well. So that is in short a brief summary about angel investing. So happy to take any questions if anyone has.
Yes, yes. So I think because in the interest of time, we'll take two, three more questions mixed to both the themes of investing on this. But I think we should host you on our, because we are planning a lot of interesting uh, events on our community. It's called community also. So we're planning a bunch of events on partner finance, on investing. I think we'll host you once for there for investing discussion per se itself. So focusing on investing only. We'll host you in the coming months. So I think there is one question from Weber. How to be a part of your syndicate, Rohan? So I think Weber, you can reach out to Rohan on LinkedIn, or I think Rohan can drop in something here.
Yeah, I just shared my LinkedIn ID. So anyone who wants to know more details, or reach out, do reach out to me on. I'll also share my email ID otherwise quickly.
Yeah. And let's take two last questions, one on angel investing and one on shift left. Before, I think you're adding in the wrong section on every time. So you have to add in this chat section. You're adding in the Q&A. So
Oh,
I
okay. I'm sorry. I
no
thought I was
worries.
seeing few questions and I added it there. Let me add it in the chat
No,
section.
I added already. I already added. No worries.
Okay. Sure.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
So okay. So one last question on. So one question on angel investing. What's your exit strategy for investing? Kunal is asking this question.
So basically, we look at like there's a syndicate lead. So syndicate lead can be me in some cases. There are other bigger syndicate leads that I co-lead with many times. So the syndicate lead is in close touch with the founders of the company. They see how the company is doing. They keep track of the traction, etc, and then they decide when to exit. So the kind of stocks which we hold get are called preferential shares. So they are the highest form of stocks possible, and you get the right to first exit. So anytime company is doing a new round of fundraise, you can either stay invested or you can choose to exit. The syndicate lead can do that. So if we are investing say 20,000 rupees, and it's a part of say a $1 million pool, now we cannot say tomorrow that I need to remove my 20,000. So this is for long term gains. And don't put your emergency funds into this, is my advice. Like only put things which you are okay to invest for a long term gain. Typically average is 4 to 5 years in when you see good gains. And yeah, I mean, it's like syndicate lead is actually planning it out well, because he himself is getting good uh, like network and communication from the founders, so they are in a better position to decide when to exit. And they'll make sure you get good returns, because they themselves are also in a way wanting to have you invest in multiple deals. So they'll not time out the exit in a wrong way.
Makes sense. So I think last question, which is the buzzword, and which is a combination of two buzzwords, AI and shift left. So how does AI enable shift left testing in software teams?
So how does AI enable shift left? So they are yeah, I mean, you can say shift left in terms of AI. You are utilizing some aspects of AI to enhance your shift left process, because uh, like you can discover what are the different aspects that can help contribute to like shifting left early, like in terms of uh, discover what are the key areas of development feature functionality that need to be addressed first and tested first. And also utilize any other knowledge that you get out of the AI in terms of utilizing that to overall shift left in the process. So if you have any specific question in terms of what aspect of AI, do let me know. I can dig deeper on that. If not, this is the general thing.
Got it. I think there are. No follow-up questions on this. I think the rest of the questions we have answered in bits and pieces here and there, and otherwise we can take it them offline on the Discord community. I think with this we can end this session, and thank you Rohan for being a patient listener and a patient answerer on for our all our random questions, and so thank you so much for joining in, and thank you a lot for sharing your words of wisdom. I think it should have given a lot of clarity to people about how they can do shift left testing, and it's just not a buzzword. And you have given some real actionable items to people on how they can actually.
Yeah,
Uh,
thanks Ashutosh for being a great host and coordinating the session so well. And thank you everyone for the really interesting questions. It's a very knowledgeable crowd here, and really enjoyed talking this during this
yeah,
past hour. And yeah, hopefully look to interact regularly with you all going forward.